everybody, and welcome back to The Rush. We are here on location at the wonderful Museum of Vancouver with some very special guests because of the Museum of Vancouver. It's got an exhibit on right now called Sex Talk and the City, so we thought we'd talk about sex for an hour.
Yeah, that's right.
Why not? We have a very special guest right now. Marina Adshade has a wonderful book called Dollars and Sex, How Economics Influences Sex and Love. How are you?
I'm terrific. It's great to be here.
Thank you so much for coming. So tell us about this concept. Is sex influencing economics, or is economics influencing our sex lives? What is it?
That's a good question. I think it goes both ways. Definitely economics influences our sex lives, and not just in terms of money, and which is what people generally think about, but just in terms of markets and the, we've talked about markets for marriage for a long time, but I take that a little bit more seriously and look at how the market affects our decisions.
Right. And where did the idea start? It was an idea of yours and a blog, and then it kind of grew from there. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, it actually started as a course. So I started looking for ways to teach economics to my students that would get them engaged and as excited about economics as I am. Because funnily enough, they didn't find being told repeatedly about inflation and interest rates as quite as stimulating. And so I put together a course that I thought that they could relate to their own lives. And a lot of this material is not new in the sense that economists have been looking at these issues for a long time. All the work in the book is from other economists doing this type of work. So I just pulled it together and I introduced the class for my students, and then the book became a blog, and the class became a blog, and then the blog eventually became a book. So
what kind of reaction did you get from students? I mean, I'm one of those non-math minded, non-economic minded people, and I know a lot of people like me, including Peter, but when you relate a topic to something that gets people excited, you kind of tend to remember things more. So what was the student reaction to this class?
Yeah, it's funny, a week before for the very first class, I got an email from somebody else who teaches a sex class. There's a history of sex, and he wrote me an email and said, don't be surprised if your students are a little disappointed when they figure out what the course is really about. But my students were not disappointed because we really were talking about sex. The very first thing that we did the first week of term is how sex workers set their prices for their different services. It is very explicit. It's not just sexy packaging. We actually talk about sex. But one of the things that in the first year that I was teaching it, I was getting coffee one day at the university, and the students in front of me in the line, and one of them turned around and said, "Are you Professor Adshade?" And I said, "Yes." And they said, "Oh, we love Thursdays because our housemate is in your class, and we wait for him to come home on Thursdays and tell us what you taught him that day, and then we always end up having a big debate about it." And so I knew that the students were really interested.
So what was one of the biggest topics in the course that sparked debate with the students? Was there something shocking? Was there something just that people didn't know?
They find it all shocking. You'd be surprised, actually, this generation, they think they know everything about sex, but they actually still have a lot to learn. So, for example, one of the things we always had a lot of debates about is they seem to have this notion that men enjoy sex and women have to be paid to have sex with men because they don't. I don't know why. Every year I have this conversation with my students. But one of the things that actually spurs a lot of debate in the class is we talk about prostitution and what prostitution is and defining prostitution. So I take the students through a series of steps. And I say, for example, if somebody pays somebody to have sex with them, is that prostitution? And then they say yes. And then I say, if somebody can't pay their landlord rent and has sex with them instead, is that prostitution? And then they say yes. And we work our way up to the inevitable, if a man buys a woman drinks all night and she goes home and has sex with them because of that, is that prostitution?
That's a good topic for debate.
And it's interesting because at that point, all the women go, no, that's not prostitution. And then all the guys always say the same thing. They always say,
what's the difference?
How expensive were the drinks?
Wow. But you've actually broken it down to an equation, and that's what it comes down to with a lot of this stuff is looking at, it's math.
It is math, and a lot of it has to do with costs and benefits, whether or not the costs of engaging in the behavior is just worth the benefits. I talk about that for infidelity, cheating outside of marriage, and for just general, sex before marriage and things like that.
Right. So is being married good for the economy, or is it the other way around, or does it affect your home life really if you're worried about money. How does it play into our everyday lives?
Being married is good for the individuals, not the legal. I mean, it really doesn't make any difference whether or not you're living together or you've actually had the ceremony. It's good for individuals because it's actually less expensive to have two people living in one house and sharing everything together. So it's efficient. And so in that sense, it is good for the economy just because it improves efficiency instead of having people all living individually.
Yeah, and where does cyberspace and online dating play into all of this? Because you've got a chapter on that as well. How does that play into everything?
Yeah, it's the online dating has had a huge influence, and it's not just the online dating websites. Actually, over time, those are becoming less and less important. With Facebook arriving on the scene and Instagram, and you'd be surprised how many different ways people can find to meet each other online. They're becoming more and more important, and the reason why that affects all of us is that it opens up the market for finding matches, and so people search a little bit longer, but ultimately they should be able to find a better match just because the market is so large now. Hopefully that should be good for relationships in the long run. And
you do touch on online dating, and again, it's about economics, but you also put a little bit of your own personal story in that as well. How was that for you, putting yourself out there to the world?
Yeah, there's a lot of stories, and there's narrative that runs throughout the book, and some of the stories that are actually about me, even though I don't say they're about me. So I am putting myself out there, and but I'm not a particularly private person, and I also think that if you want people to take the material in the book and relate it to their own lives, I think they need to see that I can relate it to my own life.
And I guess that's where the class being popular comes into play, because some people can't relate to numbers and that sort of thing, but when it's relatable, once again, whether it's with your personal story or with talking about sex, people will get interested once again.
Yeah, and also some of the results are kind of counterintuitive. They're not what you would expect. So for example, with online dating, seems to be associated with a decline in divorces. And a lot of people think the relationship should be the other way around because it's so easy to cheat. Now that
I thought it would be the opposite.
Yeah, most people think it is the opposite, but there's good reasons for it not. There's good reasons for why it's causing divorce rates to decline. And I think that when things are counterintuitive and they're not what you expect them to be, I think that just makes it so much more interesting, right?
Yeah, it certainly does. Well, make sure that you pick up the book. It is called Dollars and Sex. It'll make you love economics and maybe a few other things.
It has for me as well. I had a hard time with it when I was going to school, and it's...
No pun intended. We're talking about economics, right?
Pun totally intended. No, and I have a hard time putting the book down, so it's a great read. So,
okay, great.
Yeah,
Marina, thank you so much for joining us today. You can also go to Marina's website to find out more information. We're going to take a quick break, and when we return, Peter's going to go inside the museum here and find out what this sex exhibit is all about. So stay tuned.
That's right.